Welcome back to Control Plus. I'm really excited for today's conversation with Arvind Prabhu. He is an architecture expert that I know from a very long time, and he spent his career helping some of the world's most complex organizations, bringing technology and strategy together. And I want to learn from him what that really looks like in practice. We're going to unpack the challenges that companies face, what good architecture actually looks like, and how leaders can start building capability inside their own organizations. Let's dive in. So, Prabhu, in the Middle East, a lot of the organizations that I am speaking with and a lot of the organizations that are coming in, there's a buzzword being thrown around, which is transformation, whether it be data, AI, cloud, whatever it is, right? When organizations are essentially trying to align this new fad or new technology with their business strategy, where are the blind spots essentially?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's very topical, especially as you said in this region. Organizations usually start with strategy and they immediately jump into execution without understanding what is the best way for me to achieve my strategic objectives. How should the design look like in order for me to achieve those objectives? And when I say design, it means business design as well as technology design. So you may have a set of strategic objectives. For example, I want to increase my revenue by X%. I want to reduce costs by X%. Or you may say that I want to expand into new markets or new products and services. That's the strategic objective. But how do you realize that strategic objective should be through proper business design? And that's where most organizations fail to take stock. So when you jump directly into execution, the first thing that happens is, let's bring in this solution. Let's implement this product. Let's just bring in a consultancy to, execute the project. So that's the thinking that most companies have. But if you take a step back and say, what are the options in front of me to achieve the strategic objectives? You evaluate each and every option through proper business design, and then make a conscious choice of which option will best suit you to achieve your objectives.
It's interesting, but why does that keep happening then? Because what you've said makes logical sense, but naturally us humans are not logical, mostly, what's the word? Rational, I suppose, right?
Yes.
Why does that still keep happening? Why do we keep making the same mistakes then?
I think it's because people think that, I know what I want. Now I just want to get it. So I just jump on and start the execution process. So this is where we talked about this previously about, building something. So if you are someone who's wanting to build a new house or a new commercial building, what's the first step that you would take? You would hire an architect, you would bring them in, provide your high-level vision for the building, and have a blueprint, right? And that blueprint may be a couple of options. You may say that, I want a 4-bedroom house with a lawn and, with a pool and a party space and all the rest of it. So those are your requirements. The architect takes your requirements and comes up with a few options for you. And those options can be initial rough sketches, it could be well-defined blueprints, and you and the architect have a discussion before you finalize one or two options. Then you bring in structural engineers. So you have a tripartite discussion on whether this option would work or not, how much would it cost. You do all of that estimation, and then you zone in on one option that works for all of us. And then you start the estimation, planning, and the execution of the project itself. So before the project gets even awarded to someone, you take a step back, you design the end product, in this case a building, and that meets your requirements. And that is the step that most organizations fail to do when they embark on business transformation.
So what's the question there? What's the question you're supposed to ask? So you said there's a problem. When I'm thinking of it from a layman's perspective, what's the problem statement when I'm trying to reach that stage? And I'm like, how does this align to what X company actually needs to do? Is that how you're supposed to think?
Yeah, I mean, the first question that organizations should ask themselves is, I want to achieve this. What's the best way for me to achieve it? And what does good look like at the end of it? So if a company wants to launch a new product or a service or expand into a new market, the first question they should be asking themselves is, how does the end solution look like? How does it look like in this new market? Have I done the proper research in terms of understanding the demand in that market? Have we done prototyping if that's useful in the context? Have we tested the product in this target market? So, all of those are things that goes with the strategy. But of course, even in that space, a lot of companies fail to do that. But once you've decided, okay, this is the market that I want to expand into, or this is the product that I need to build because there is greater demand for it, then you bring in an experienced architect to say, okay, if it is a product, what is a product design? This is where you start from top down to say the high level requirements drives this product framework, and then you take each and every component of the product and zoom into the details. And so you finalize the product design before you start building that product. So it's the same thing applies for anything. If you look at manufacturing, if you're building a car, you need to have a fully designed car before you go to the assembly line. And design is a process. So when you do this for manufacturing a car, why would you not do this for a business transformation initiative, right? Somebody has realized that I need to transform my business, either because there's not enough capability, there is no competitive advantage within the organization, or they have fragmented systems, poor data quality, time to market is too high. So these are some of the drivers behind business transformation. So before embarking on the transformation journey, sit back and plan properly. And that can be facilitated by an architect.
Got you. So just to go back then, you said the challenges with aligning a tech strategy to the overarching business strategy is predominantly people jumping into execution, right?
Yes.
They don't take a step back
Yes.
to visualize what the target, say, so to speak,
Yes.
is.
Yeah.
And what are the right steps to get there, correct?
Yes,
So
exactly.
that's the predominantly, that's the
Absolutely.
main challenge that people are facing. Is
Yes.
that what you're trying to say?
Absolutely.
With any technology, with AI, with
Yes.
cloud, with whatever it is.
Even a business transformation, right? This is where, architecture is such a wide discipline. You have business architecture that helps businesses design the capabilities. Then you have application and data architecture that helps organizations build software solutions that are fit for purpose. Then you have technology architecture that enables you to host these software applications in the right model. Then you have cybersecurity architecture, cloud architecture, what have you. So there are different architecture domains. But business architecture is an integral part of enterprise architecture, which entails defining your capabilities. By capability, what I mean is, what are the things that a business need to have in order for it to successfully deliver products and services to its customers. If it is a manufacturing company, it needs to have the manufacturing capability.
Yeah.
If it is a servicing organization, it needs to have the taking of orders, fulfilling those orders, and servicing those orders. And of course, you have the corporate functions of finance, human capital, procurement, and all the rest of it. So these are all broad set of capabilities that any organization need to have. But each of those capabilities, you have to ask, what does good look like? A procurement function, how should a procurement function really perform, really work? What are the KPIs by which I will measure the performance of that capability? And once you define that business capability, i.e. the what, then you can get into the how. Okay, how do I enable this function with technology, with AI, with data, with analytics, what have you? That is where, the technology or application architecture comes in. So business architecture should lead into application and technology architecture.
Got you. And from all the years that you've spent within architecture, from a C-level executive, what are the warning signs an organization is losing control of its, let's say, complexity?
That's a great question. So we see increasingly organizations that suffer from a plethora of applications. A lot of times, multiple applications performing similar or same function. So that increases complexity. And oftentimes these applications are introduced in silo. They are not fully integrated with other systems. They don't always talk to each other. So you have islands of data that sits in these siloed applications. So you're not able to trust a single source. for all your data needs or decision-making needs. And this is prevalent in financial services. For example, banks, 3,000, 4,000 applications is quite common in tier 1 and tier 2 banks, large banks, for example. And the reason why this happens is there is no proper design and control. Everybody wants to implement a new solution, a new application. And this comes from the business community, usually from the middle management layer. They say, I am working on this function or process. This is completely fragmented. I would like to automate this, and here is a tool. Without thinking what the rest of the enterprise is doing. Oftentimes businesses are organized in silos, and therefore they don't always know what other business lines within the group are doing.
Yeah, makes sense.
And these siloed applications that don't talk to each other within that silo or across the group, creates this islands of data and the fragmentation. And people don't always focus on end-to-end processes that may have to traverse multiple applications. They don't always integrate those applications.
Okay. In this case, if I take out the money aspect, if a company can afford whatever licensing costs they can, and they're okay with running 4,000 applications, would that still hurt a business? And if it does, how?
Absolutely, it will hurt, because this is where time to market is important. So I want to make a change, particularly in banks. This is quite prevalent, where regulations hit the bank. They have limited time to implement the regulatory changes on their processes. They will have to scramble firstly to see which applications and processes they need to change. What are the applications that are impacted by this regulation? Several years ago, MiFID II was implemented, and most banks were scrambling to see, which parts of the organization does it impact, and what is the real impact? What do I need to change in those systems? When you have, thousands of, hundreds of applications, making those changes, either from a regulatory perspective or a new product that you may want to launch, what processes does it impact, and therefore what applications do I need to change, becomes a challenge. Secondly, it's not just about cost. The platform becomes unreliable as you put more and more applications. Who is monitoring cybersecurity threats on those applications? The overheads become more. And who's monitoring if capacity in those platforms are, as expected, especially for on-prem applications. I know the world is moving towards cloud, so this may not be a huge issue, but still, these are some of the factors people fail to understand. And sometimes there is no conscious effort to decommission platforms that are no longer required. So all of those continue to stay on the ecosystem, and without proper vendor and license management, some of these applications we continue to pay, without really checking who's using it. What's the usage? Is it really increasing? Is it static? So cost is one aspect, but driving change and ensuring that the platform is up and running becomes a challenge.
That makes sense. Very clear as well, because so you said regulation, you said
new products, new features.
New features.
Yeah.
And then?
And the stability, performance and stability of the platform, and the ongoing maintenance. Because all of these applications require some sort of maintenance, either, patching or monitoring, and from a cybersecurity monitoring.
That's the most important thing as well, the cybersecurity piece, which I didn't even realize, because you don't know what application that you've forgotten about will actually get you access, compromise your entire system.
And the trusted golden source of data. Which system do you trust to provide you the most accurate and up-to-date data? And this is more relevant as we move towards an AI world. Having accurate golden sources of data, master data sources, is so critical. Data quality is oftentimes forgotten. Now, slowly, organizations have realized the importance of master data sources and the quality of those data sources. They are implementing data lake-like solutions where data from source systems are brought in and curated to create data products to drive analytics. But still, the transactional data can reside in so many different systems. and therefore, which data do you trust becomes a big question. So that's some of the challenges you see with multiple systems within the enterprise.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so we've discussed, I suppose, challenges as
Yeah.
a whole in terms of what the organizations are facing. So you said, what does good look like? So what does that actually look like? If an organization handles this problem well,
Yeah.
can you get me to envision what that actually looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take an example of the human body, right? What good looks like may not be the most appropriate question to ask a human.
Big biceps.
Yeah, exactly.
Six packs.
Yes. But if you look at it deep down, there are vitals for the human. The heart rate should be so much, the BP should be so much, and so forth. So you have, if the parameters are within those ranges, then the person is in good shape, physically fit or mentally fit and so forth. So you say that about a human being. So similarly for organizations, for each and every business capability that is within that organization, you would want to define what good looks like. So if you take, for example, a finance function is largely there to make sure that you have proper budgets in place and it is all well planned. You're able to record the financial transactions, so you know how much cash is leaving, how much cash is coming in, and you do the financial accounting of the back of it. So eventually you can produce financial statements and reports. That's broadly the responsibility of a finance function. Of course, different organizations have different definitions of finance, but this is broadly what it is. So how do you define good looks like for finance? So they are able to capture all of these cash flows at source, real time or near real time basis as the business may warrant. So you have one golden source to go to look at all of your cash transactions. Then you have a proper accounting engine that knows how to account for, the CapEx, OpEx, and all the rest of it. And then you have a solution or a capability to produce those timely and accurate financial reports that a CFO can look at or a business leads can look at, right? So these are all the capabilities broadly it needs to have. Now, timely delivery of financial reports could be a KPI. A good organization will always know how much cash balances there are in the bank account. What are the upcoming cash commitments for the organization? Do we have enough liquidity to meet our upcoming obligations? Do I need to borrow from the market? And how can I keep the cost of funding to a minimum as possible? So these are some of the ways to look at finance function. I'm just using finance as an example, right? Similarly for procurement, how can I maximize the value that I get from any product or service that I procure? And how can I drive down the cost? These are some of the ways to look at. So that's what a business architect helps an organization define. What does good look like for each of these? And then the next step would be to, how can I automate all of this? What kind of decision support engines do I need to make decisions?
When you make decision-making
Decision, yeah. So basically, if you take, do I want to invest in a project to build a new commercial building, for example, right? So in order to make the decision, you may need to have a lot of data points. A decision support system, if the data is available, can crunch those numbers and say, if you invest in this building, you may get X amount of returns in this location, over a period of time. And it can advise you. And now with the advent of AI, it can even recommend, certain investment options for you. So that's what I mean by decision support. In order for me to make a decision to invest in something, the system enables you to make the decision by providing various options.
Understood. In that specific example that you've shared,
Yeah.
you're talking about a sort of mature finance function where everything is quite clearly laid out,
Yes.
right? When you compare this to, let's take a business that's not as mature.
Yeah.
Let's dumb it down a little bit for me to understand.
Yeah.
How does an EA practice actually help, let's say, a 50% IT, a 50% 50% business.
Yeah.
If a head of IT, there's a one person that's there,
Yeah.
he uses EA principles. That specific example of what you've said in finance, how does that relate to that person?
Yeah, for smaller businesses who may not be able to afford, a full-blown function to build blueprints, the leads who run that organization will need to bear a few things in mind, right? All of these capabilities still applies for a small business. The business may be selling a product or offering a service. That is how the revenue streams may work for that business. What are those revenue streams, and how do I make sure that the business is able to meet the customer demands by supplying those products and services? And again, we talked about some of the supporting capabilities like finance, human capital, and so forth. So those things would still apply even if the business is small. Where it becomes different is, from a systems landscape perspective, maybe I would be better off if I have a single platform solution. It may not be best of breed. I may not have like 10 different systems, one for hiring people, one for recording finance transactions, and one for making procurement, and one for a CRM component. But you may end up having one single platform that performs all of these functions reasonably well. May not be best of breed, but reasonably well. That may be sufficient enough. So it's a cradle to grave kind of a platform where you start the customer contacts on the system. So in the CRM module.
Cradle to grave.
Yeah, exactly. And then the order is placed by the customer. You record the order, you fulfill the order, and you get paid for that fulfilled order. So all of them are recorded in a single platform, and you're able to report on it. You have many such platforms in the market that offer that capability.
Sure.
Where they introduce more products, more services, more geographies, that's when more complexity comes in from a business perspective. And if they want to differentiate themselves from their competitors, maybe in some cases, they may have to go for best of breed solutions. For example, pricing. Some organizations may need to know how to price their products and services. And that pricing may have to be dynamic. And that may have to take into account multiple factors. So pricing engine may be a differentiator for them. So they may choose to invest in such a product so that they can come up with more accurate pricing that may win them more customer orders. In some cases, they may have to build something proprietary. It may not be available in the market. So they may need to, in order to differentiate themselves from the other market participants, they may have to build something in-house. That is when they need to bring in this proprietary and in-house technology capability, or perhaps an outsourced partner to build those capabilities.
Very interesting. Arvind, look, you've worked in different types of organizations. So I'm assuming from your network or from your conversations, you've seen what actually the companies that do enterprise architecture well,
Yeah.
how they think and how they operate. What is different in their mindset that is not available in X company that does not have a mature EA function?
Yeah. So this goes back to the conversation we had, Ruwais. From strategy, people jump to execution, right? That's what most organizations do. Organizations that have a mature enterprise architecture function will apply the design thinking to achieving the necessary outcomes, right? So they will be outcome focused, and what's the best way to achieve that outcome will be driven by enterprise architects. And there is also a misconception in the market that enterprise architecture means only technology architecture.
Yeah.
That's not the case. As we touched on a while ago, it entails business architecture as the first component. What does the business do? And what do they need to address some of the challenges and opportunities? That's what business architects are really good at defining. And then once that is defined, then solving for it becomes easier. So oftentimes, framing the problem is the most important thing. Problem and the root causes of that. Once you've got that well defined, then oftentimes the solution stands at you.
5 whys.
Yeah, exactly. So you keep on asking that because, and this is a challenge in most organizations. So that's where the EA function comes in, to kind of ask those questions, to be a thought partner, thought leader, who can work with the business leaders to define that problem, define that opportunity, and define the capabilities that are required to fulfill that opportunity, right? And then it becomes easy, as I say, from a technology architecture perspective, you have various options. What is the best way for us to, enable those capabilities? Do I need to buy a new product? Do I already have a platform that can fulfill this? And again, in that process, EA, one of the core values of an enterprise architect is to look at the enterprise. That's, as the name suggests, it's not for a particular business line or a particular corporate function. It's for the enterprise. So enterprise architects should always be thinking about the bigger picture. So this business is asking me to build something, or they have a need to build something. How can I make this scalable so that the rest of the organization can benefit from it, if it is relevant? So that's really the value add. So I see enterprise architects as thought leaders and partners working closely with CIOs and CEOs, and they should operate at a board level as well as at an execution level.
How can, let's say, an EA right now become that thought leader with a CFO or a CEO and not just part of an IT function? Because from what I have seen, from what I've been recruiting in the Middle East, EA typically is a function within the IT, right?
Yes.
So how does this person take practical steps to go up to becoming a thought leader with the CFO?
Yeah, that's a great question. The reason why enterprise architects are within the technology organization is ultimately technology enables business capabilities. But oftentimes organizations are very reactive, right? So they receive a business demand. The business tells technology that I want this product, or I want to implement this application. And this is not what it was initially envisioned to be. So enterprise architects who are in technology, work across the board, across the enterprise to identify challenges in business processes. What is stopping us from delivering on our business objectives? Right? Even if upfront analysis was not conducted to translate strategy into architectures, if a project is thrown at a technology division, enterprise architects jump on that opportunity to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Okay, you've given us a set of project requirements. What is driving this? What is the real problem that you're trying to solve? Oftentimes, you and I have seen this, requirements are written as if the solution has already been thought of, and, it's very dictatorial. Thou shalt go and build this software for me. And therein lies the problem, right? So that's what enterprise architects are supposed to address by saying that, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? So that's how they operate from a project perspective. But they can elevate themselves if a mandate is given to them to work directly with the CXOs of the organization as they define the strategy. We talked about the strategy and execution continuum. Architects sit in the middle. And even though they are in the middle, they influence development of strategy, definition of strategy. And that's where they partner with CEOs and say, this strategy, can this be executed? Can this be realized? Have you thought about, perhaps longer term objectives as well as midterm objectives? So these are some of the lines of questioning that an enterprise architect can bring to the table to shape that strategy. I'm not saying the architect should apply constraints onto the strategy, but make it real. Right.
That's where I think a lot of the challenges come in, because people might feel like it's constraints, like you said, rather than advice and help open up. It's almost like speaking to a therapist.
Yeah, it can be sometimes. And sometimes EA function is hated for stopping initiatives on its tracks because that's not the right approach from a solutioning perspective. For example, a CXO of a business may decide that this is not the right platform for me. I want to replace it with a completely brand new platform that they've heard of somewhere. That is the wrong approach, for building capabilities for an organization. So an enterprise architect can actually be a trusted advisor in that stance to say, what is the real reason behind it? What problem are we trying to solve? Because randomly shooting ideas and executing ideas will not solve for the problem at hand and will not help the business achieve its objectives. This is where we say it's by design. If you want to achieve a set of objectives, so let's take an example. Somebody wants to go into a bodybuilding competition. And for a particular age or weight class, they need to prepare for it. And they will have certain targets for it. And there are certain ways to preparing for their competition, right? So, and it is very targeted workout sessions or exercises or regimens that they follow to be able to achieve those outcomes. It is by design. So businesses also need to do the same thing. If they want to transform something, they need to have a vision for that area or the product that they are transforming. And that's where architecture comes in and says, okay, you want to achieve X in this area. This is what good looks like. And that could be the North Star. And then you work backwards from it, because oftentimes organization will have umpteen constraints. They may have resource constraint or funding constraint, or they may be up against time to deliver something, for their customers. So all of these constraints will always be there. But don't start with the constraints when you design something. Start with what good looks like. What is your North Star? In a no constraints environment, how should this capability or product or process should look like? Then work backwards. Then apply some of those inevitable constraints and say, maybe I should take a baby step, but your baby step should not be in a completely different direction. It should be aligned to the North Star. That's where architects come in. So architects to me deliver two important things. One is the blueprint to achieving the strategic objectives. How can you achieve the objectives? Through proper design. And that blueprint can be for the target state or interim state. And when I say blueprints can be at multiple layers. It can be business design, it can be application design, data design, technology design. So all of them are interconnected, but you start with the business design and then move progressively down. Then apply the constraints to deliver a roadmap. So the roadmap basically tells you, this is what I want to achieve in the next 2 to 3 years. And then work backwards and say, what are the low-hanging fruits? What are the business priorities that I need to address? In some areas, I may have to build tactical solutions that may be a complete throwaway, but a conscious decision is made with all the powers that be. And then you incrementally build your capability towards that nirvana state. And that incremental build is what I encourage normally. Architects can build blueprints, but then you can't really do Big Bang. If the Big Bang takes 3 years, there is no benefit provided. So an agile delivery is important, and that's what most organizations are embracing these days. So, but agile doesn't mean that you're just randomly driving. You know your destination, the best path to take that destination, and you have interim milestones. Along the way, you deliver value to the business. Right. So roadmaps and blueprints are the two most important artifacts that architects produce, and along the way provide the thought leadership.
Sure. Now, in terms of the leaders within, let's say, a company where EA is good, EA is bad, what are the behaviors that you've seen that are different in this leader and this leader?
Yeah, I think it's leaders who are very objective, who are fact-based, who want to have, who don't rush to solutions, but want to get an expert opinion on, how should the problem be solved. And, generally who appreciates architecture. So if you're asking, how would I sell the idea of architecture to someone who doesn't know anything about architecture? I think that it requires a bit of practical examples, right? So some of the things that we talked about, some of the past experiences, for example, they could have been failed initiatives where they tried to rush to a solution without taking a step back. So past learnings is an important thing. If someone, willing to look at the past and learn from it, that would be the type of person that you can work with. And also look at examples, of great organizations. I happen to have the privilege of working with some of the best organizations in the world. which not only had a simple strategy, strategy that maybe fit within a sentence. For example, Wells Fargo's strategy a long time ago was putting 8 products in a customer's wallet.
8 products?
Yes. It's 8 financial products. It could be a credit card, insurance, brokerage, whatever, because that was a universal bank, and they were able to, put that strategy in just one sentence, right? That's really, what drove the rest of it. So then the question comes, how can I put 8 products in a customer's wallet? What do I need to do to achieve that objective? And Wells Fargo, among others, are some of the companies that took architecture close to heart. They didn't say, okay, now you guys have targets, you just have to go sell and sell and sell, and that's how you will make, achieve this strategy. Yes, that was part of it. That was not all of it, right? So it has to be designed in such a way that you use every single interaction with the customer to understand more about the customer and their needs and the problems and challenges. And you design systems and platforms to understand and document those challenges and the needs of the customer, and use every single interaction to present them the best solution that would address their challenges and problems, right? And that is by design. It is not random. I'm going to employ thousands of telecallers and salespeople to just randomly knock at people's doors to sell these 8 products. That was not the strategy. The strategy was to maximize every single interaction to the customer's benefit. And if the customer benefits, obviously the bank benefits, right? So, and this is one example where strategy was simple enough, was well thought of, obviously, by various parties within the organization. And then it was well designed at all levels, not just technology. Technology was just one enabler. How do you use every single process that deals with the customer, to maximize the value add for the customer? This is just one example.
Wow. Yeah, I can take so many nuggets from that. If I was to architect my business now,
Yes.
my business, the business that I work for, if you look at it in that sense, how can we maximize every candidate interaction or a client interaction?
Yeah.
Wow, the benefits of that.
Yes.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you were advising leadership right now on how to build an enterprise architecture function from scratch, how would you build this capability step by step? And look, make it practical and consumable.
Yeah. I think it's a much needed question especially for this region. Some organizations may have skills, they may not be called enterprise architect roles, but they may be people who are already operating in that capacity. We have to identify them and empower them to play this role. So that's the first step I would start, rather than looking outside.
Can I cut you off here?
Yes, sure.
What is that? So how do you find them? What skills are you looking for?
Yeah, so let's take an example. Organizations, especially IT shops, normally have business analysts, right? This is a recognized function, analysis. And if they don't have business analysts, they should at least have systems analysts. So these are the types of people who are better qualified to elevate themselves as business architects. We'll come to that in a minute. There are other groups of individuals. So you may have a solution architect, who takes requirements from a project team and actually solves for it, builds an application design document, for example. So the solution architect is operating within a smaller space, i.e. there is a project that has been well defined, the scope of it is defined, the objectives are defined, and the requirements, let's say, are defined as well. The solution architect takes those requirements, comes up with the most optimal solution for that requirement. That's the solution architect. But if you expand that role to say, Mr. Solution Architect, you're not just going to take project requirements anymore, you're going to elevate yourself and look at the bigger picture across the enterprise, meaning that you proactively understand the challenges and opportunities within the business. You come up with what good looks like, and you define what the roadmap is. Yeah. So if you give them that mandate, sometimes solution architects can elevate themselves to enterprise architect role. That's definitely possible. possibility. But not all solution architects can become enterprise
No, got you.
If we go back to the first pool of analysts, business analysts or systems analysts, if they have had enough experience, they would have understood the business better, because that's what they're supposed to do. They understand the business. They would have understood the business systems, especially if they had longer tenures in the organization. You can lift them up by saying, don't stop at specific project requirements that may come from the business teams. Look at the bigger picture. Let's start building the business capability model for the organization. And when I say business capability model, really mapping out what the business does today. What products do they sell? What services do they offer? What markets do they offer them through? What channels
really get
do they...
into the details.
Exactly.
Got
Model
you.
the business on paper, and it's like basically nested boxes that says, function within a function sort of a thing. And that's something that they can do. It may require some training, and it's not really complex. Exactly.
And so systems analyst and
business
business analyst.
Yeah, enlist them. And also they, in some organizations, they may have process designers.
Yeah.
This could be a luxury, but some organizations do have that. They are good at defining end-to-end business processes. Today, they may be defining part of the process, but then expand it. Have them look at procure to pay, invest to divest, the end-to-end life cycle for hire to retire. So that's end-to-end, right? So, and most organizations don't look at it end-to-end. And therein lies the problem. They look at a fragmented portion of the process because that's what somebody may own. I'm owning this function within the end-to-end journey, and therefore I want to make this better. I may be motivated enough to do that. I may have the funding pool to support that. So I make just this part better. So I make my biceps better, but my quads are really weak. Just to use an analogy there. You always have to look at holistically across the end-to-end life cycle.
Got you. Yeah. I like how you swiftly took a dig at me as well. But going back to the systems analyst, so you said first step is looking at what your internal capability is and enabling whoever could be a potential enterprise architect. So you look inwards, or if not, you hire. Okay,
you hire.
Cool.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Then what happens after that?
Yeah, then so you're establishing that as a function, as a recognized function, and obviously you socialize with business stakeholders and CXOs to say, look, I've established this function. This is the mandate of this function, and the initial remit of that function is to develop the business capability model, end-to-end process journeys or user journeys, and then come up with what good looks like. That's the mandate. So please collaborate with this function to come up with those models.
Okay. Now, the business units that you speak about, and this is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
If they are very busy and they don't see immediate value from you, why would they invest that time with you now? And how do you work around that?
Yeah. This is where we're going back to the previous conversation. People need to have the conviction that architecture is a core capability for the organization, and they should have the understanding of what architecture does, and look at the market, look at their peers, look at, Jim Collins wrote a book called Good to Great. Some of the CXOs should read books like that, wherein what are the differentiators between good companies and great companies? It is one of the key characteristics is design. So once you've sold that concept to CXOs, they've bought into this, that I need to leverage architecture. Then they need to be a little bit patient,
makes sense.
to say that because it's a new function, you need to bring the function up to speed. But also, if you have really qualified architects, they don't have to wait for too long. Some of the initial challenges and the questions that the architect poses to the CXO will, make it evident that this function is so important, because they should be asking questions that the CXOs did not think of.
Yeah, understood. Okay, so that's done. We've done that. What's next in terms of building a practice then?
Yeah, so
they go build relationships. They go have their coffees, get the problems.
Yes. One of the core skill of enterprise architect is to be able to bring in diverse groups of individuals for a dialogue, for a discussion in a workshop setting, for example, right? To say, bring in various business representatives. They may be SMEs in their respective functions. Bring in your technology experts who may be supporting those functions through systems, and have a fact-finding workshop. So that fact-finding workshop would be largely to drive the business capability models. What does the business do day in the life of, for example? It can be done in a collaborative setting. It can be through one-to-one interviews. These are the things that business analysts normally do as part of their jobs, right? They do one-to-one interviews to gather user requirements, for example. So you can do it in whichever setting you like, but core competency, a core skill of an enterprise architect is to be able to facilitate discussion, to discover things about the current state of play and current challenges and opportunities, and be able to synthesize those in a way that they can play back to the C-suite to say, we have done fact-finding sessions with all of your wider organization, and these are the top themes that came out. These are the top challenges that were surfaced. And these were the reasons for those challenges. And here are potential things that you may want to consider. And the potential things may be tactical, short-term, low-hanging opportunities, or some of them may be, we need to invest in this capability. Because here is a large volume of transactions that are done manually. It's prone to errors, operational risk, potential losses, potential penalties, what have you. Right? So these are things that will be surfaced from those workshops. So guys, you're losing money. You're not really positioned well to compete in this market for this product. These are things that will surface from that workshop. So this is where the enterprise architect should be able to synthesize large volume of information that comes from these workshops, to be able to play back in a succinct way, tell a story, right? What works, what doesn't work, why doesn't work, what are the options to fixing it?
So you've done this then, and effectively you're having a good practice that's running, solving problems, trying to have those conversations. As a leader, what is the signal that you have to look out for to know when you have to scale this organization?
Yeah, I think
organization or team? You get
So the CXOs will see the benefit of a good EA practice very quickly. Usually in the first 90 days to 100 days, they should be able to see the benefit. Like I say, if the enterprise architect can have that 100-day plan to be able to play back, the challenges to the business, and the opportunities that lie, and what are the areas we need to dig deeper. For example, there may be some quick wins versus things that require more deeper analysis, right? The quick wins, the moment you position that to the CXOs, they should see the value. This is something that I have not been able to surface through the existing organization. That is when, there is a recognition for the work that the enterprise architecture function does, and the CXOs may be willing to fund that function to scale it up, right? That's just one way. And it should happen naturally and organically.
People just talk. People are like, "Oh wow,
Yes.
Arvind, what a great workshop!
Yes.
I wish we had done this before.
Yes.
I wish I could see the benefits quicker," because they're excited
Exactly.
about what happened in that
Exactly.
workshop or
Yes.
after the conversation.
Yes.
And then I think that's how you get board level credibility
Yes,
as well, right? Because
absolutely.
it goes upwards. It's like,
Yes. And people build walls between functions. A lot of times, knowingly or unknowingly, they build walls. But an enterprise architect, because they have an enterprise-wide remit, one of the things they need to do is to break down those walls by bringing people together to collaborate, to look at the end-to-end picture. If somehow you can paint that end-to-end picture and walk a CXO through that journey, and the pitfalls at every step of the way, that would be an eye-opener.
yeah.
And then if you've done that job really well, the solution will stare at you, as we discussed.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I need to have a proper end-to-end re-engineered process. Now, with the advent of AI, organizations have a great opportunity to reimagine their workflows, reimagine their capabilities with an AI-first lens. In a new AI-enabled world, what would I do? How would I run this process? Traditional processes are you provide data in a form, in some shape of, some way or other, you pump in data at one end. it goes through a sequence, usually a sequence of process. In some cases, it could be having parallel steps, but that's fine. Then finally, there's some output that comes out, right? That's usually what process does. And that's a traditional way of thinking, an end-to-end process. Now, with an AI-enabled world, you can obviously ask natural language questions. The system, an AI-enabled system, has enough intelligence based on the data that the organization has and the data that it can source from public sources, if that is permissible. And it naturally drives the user, through that process. So it acts as a proxy to some extent. There's always a human in the loop, but to some extent, the AI actually takes over the driving seat and drives the process with the help of the human intervening at the right steps. And that's how processes will need to be thought of. So processes and capabilities will be reimagined, and enterprise architects play a huge role.
Someone said, I watched this in a video, sorry, and I think I said this in my first episode with Peter as well, that the future of work is going to be director of tasks rather than a doer of tasks.
Absolutely.
It comes down to that.
Yeah. So you have a digital pair which kind of takes over from you, does the heavy lifting for you, but you get to intervene as and when necessary to drive that process, or branch off the processes. But for the most part, the systems will enable that journey.
100%. Final question.
Yes.
If you're developing future business architects or enterprise architects, what skills do you value the most?
Communication. I think most importantly, the ability to tell a story about the problems and opportunities that the organization faces. And I don't mean it lightly. Obviously, you can't be a good storyteller without content. You need to have the basic content to be able to structure a story to a CXO. And how does it come? It's basically having a good understanding of the organization. Like we said, understanding of what the business vision is, what the business strategy is, what are the products and services it offers. Understanding the business is really important. Understanding the competitors in that market is also crucial.
So storytelling skills is one, you said.
Yes.
And to go a bit further, is there like a framework that you need to follow when you say a story?
You can. I mean, seasoned architects are not always constrained by frameworks. Frameworks are useful for people who are getting on the ladder. So, for example, there are architecture frameworks like TOGAF or
sorry. What I meant was frameworks from like if I'm telling a story.
Yeah.
Should I formulate a story in A, B, C?
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm going with this?
Yeah. No, I think generally there is, you start off with we need to do this because. So I would recommend that we implement or we build a capability within the organization because it will provide XYZ benefits. And this is something that we lack today. For example, I'm just constructing a framework for you on the fly.
To do X in Y,
yes,
which will result in Z. Sorry,
yes.
I didn't say that correct.
No, yeah. So you provide a recommendation first, right? Followed by why you're recommending that and what is the value of it. Yeah, and you can construct it however it is. Here is a problem that we are facing, and therefore, to solve for it, I recommend that we do X. Fair. And here are the benefits that you may get, right? So it's an elevator pitch. Of course, CXOs don't always have the time. So you should be able to frame, and that's what I mean by story, not to cook up things. So, but in order to tell a success, it's very difficult to summarize. This really. Synthesize large volume of information to be able to provide an actionable intelligence to a CXO. That's what a EA does really well. But that takes time. It takes. But if somebody is longing to learn about the organization, I really have to understand how this works. That inquisitiveness, that drive to understand how things work, would be a useful skill to have. And of course, if somebody comes from a technology background with business knowledge and experience, would be the sweet spot, right? Somebody has been in technology for a while. They have seen, goods and bads, and they want to make a difference. and they understand the business and they have great ideas to solve for it, right? Those are the types of people who can, tell that story that I'm talking about.
Storytellers, curious.
Yes. Good knowledge and understanding of the domain in which they operate, and technology savvy as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Prabhu. That was incredibly insightful from me, being a recruiter in tech and actually hearing about some of the challenges that my clients or my candidates have been talking about for all of these years. Architecture as a function itself, and I've told you this, I've always thought of it as a tech function and always thought of it as being extremely complex. Maybe I didn't speak to the right people, but it's a very business focused role.
It is.
When you break it down like that, it actually resonates quite well. So really enjoyed this chat, Prabhu, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners would gain a lot of value from the practices that you've seen and that you've been able to share. I'm sure we have a lot that we didn't discuss that obviously requires a separate conversation, but who knows? We might meet each other again here in this podcast again soon.
Absolutely.
Sorry, what am I saying? Yeah, but you get the idea.
Yes, absolutely. No, it was a pleasure chatting with you, Ruvais. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Take care, Pramit.
Thank you.